4 unarmed ships, 1,700 prisoners of war, not a gun aboard any of them by treaty. The Sable Market had been studying the manifest for a month. Exchange convoy. 17 was the largest prisoner repatriation of the war, and it sailed under the strangest flag in space, no flag at all. Or rather, the red open circle of the compact, the neutral relief order that both humanity and Avicii had trusted through 6 years of otherwise total war to carry their captured people home. 4 chartered transports, grey-hulled, unarmed by treaty, painted with the circle at prow and beam. Aboard them, 811 human prisoners of war released from the Visai camps at Skell, sailing home, and 902 Visai prisoners from the human camps at Faro Deep, sailing the other way. The convoy would meet at the neutral anchorage of Candle Station, mid-reach, where the manifests would be exchanged, the columns would cross, and 1,700 people would walk past each other to the ships going home. The senior human prisoner was Colonel Marcus Webb, 49, taken at the Fall of the Hollows 3 years prior. A garrison commander who had surrendered his rock only when its air ran out, and who had spent his captivity conducting, by the Visai camp commandant's exasperated admission, the most correct and most relentless campaign of prisoner administration in the war. Rosters, grievances, education rolls, all of it wielded like artillery. His counterpart, senior among the Visa, was Flag Captain Vresh, taken in the same campaign when her cruiser was boarded at the Hollows Gate, 3 days after her squadron had spent Webb's garrison's air with a precision she had never once apologized for. Prisoners of that particular war were not in the apology business. They had met formally twice. Once at the manifest signing, where they exchanged the exact courtesies the conventions required and not one syllable more. And once in the transport's exercise ring, where the human and Visai prisoner blocks kept to their own hours by mutual arrangement, and where Webb, passing, had observed that the flag captain ran her evening circuits precisely as his intelligence file said she fought, economically, and watching everything. 1,700 veterans, 2 chains of command, 1 thin grey hull between them and the void, and a shared destination called home. The neutral reach was safe, the way quiet neighborhoods are safe, by reputation and by everyone's interest in keeping it so. The compact's rules were austere by design. Exchange convoys sailed unarmed, unescorted, but for a single martial cutter whose armament was ceremonial and whose real weapon was its transponder. To fire on the red circle was to make an enemy of both fleets at once, plus every neutral port in the reach. In 6 years, no one had tested it. Pirates are businessmen, and the mathematics had never closed. Exchange 17 closed the mathematics. 1,700 prisoners of war, every one of them, a name 2 governments had already proven they would pay for, aboard 4 unarmed hulls with 1 toy escort, on a published schedule in the emptiest water in the reach. The Sable Market was not a crew but a cartel, ransom brokers with a fleet, and their assessment, recovered later from their flagship's ledgers, was written in the language of commodity trading, acquisition of the century. 2 governments bidding against each other for the same cargo. Projected yield, a treasury. Risk, the compact's anger. Priced and accepted, we will be beyond the reach by winter. They took the convoy at the reach's midpoint, 11 hours from Candle Station, with the professionalism the ledgers implied. The martial cutter's drives were killed by precision fire in the first minute, disabled, not destroyed, the market understanding perfectly well that a dead marshal was a war crime, while a drifting one was merely a witness. Then the heave to demand, transmitted with courtesy, almost with apology, all transports will cut thrust and prepare for boarding and cargo audit. Passengers will be well treated. Passengers are, after all, the inventory. 11 pirate hulls took station around the convoy, cutters, 2 armed haulers for the inventory, and the flagship Sable Rose, black and brass, a converted liner that had been taking people from ships for 11 years. Aboard the transport, Mercy of Candle, the compact's convoy master did the only thing the rules left her. She opened the all-ships channel, stated the situation without decoration, and appended the sentence that the conventions required and that changed everything after it. Under compact law, she said, passengers retain the right of self-defense against parties outside the war. I am required to inform you of this. I have no means to offer you except the information itself. In the holds of 4 transports, 1,700 prisoners of 2 navies looked up at the speakers and then, block by block, at each other. The parley of the prisoners took place in the Mercy of Candle's cargo hold, between the human blocks and the Vizier blocks. In the 40 minutes the pirates spent maneuvering their boarding queues, and it was conducted by 2 people who had spent 3 years learning, from opposite sides of a wire, exactly how much the other's word was worth. Webb spoke first, because the hold was in the human blocks section, and hospitality has rules even in catastrophe. He laid out the arithmetic with garrison bluntness. The market's business was ransom, which meant separation, sorting, and sale, officers from ranks, humans from vici, the valuable from the leverage. Some would go to their governments, at prices that would fund piracy for a decade. Some, the ones whose governments balked, would go to the other markets, the ones with no communiques. Everyone in this hold, he said, has survived capture once by soldiers under conventions. What is queued up outside has no conventions. I have 800 trained personnel and no weapons. You have 900 and the same armory. Alone, each of us is infantry. Together we are the largest boarding repulse force ever assembled in one hull, and the enemy is kind enough to be bringing us our weapons by hand. Vresh had listened, in the Visar way, without moving. Her answer, as the hold's log recorder kept it, was characteristically economical. Colonel, you are proposing that prisoners of 2 wars fight a third one, together, on parole to each other. My officers will ask me one question. Who commands? Answer it correctly, and you have my 900. Webb answered it correctly. Nobody commands both, he said. You command yours, I command mine, and between us we command the plan, jointly, unanimously, or not at all. The parole is this: for as long as there is a pirate underway in this reach, your enemy is my enemy, my deck is your deck, and neither of our wars exists. It ends when the last boarder is off these hulls, and we go back to being honestly captured people, and I will sign the manifest to that effect myself. Vresh stood silent for the length, witnesses said, of 4 breaths. Then she extended her hand, palm angled in the Visser manner, for the grip her file said she had never once offered a human. The hollows is suspended, she said. Show me your corridors, Colonel. We have perhaps 30 minutes, and I intend to be disappointed in the pirates on schedule. What the Sable Market believed it was boarding was a cattle run, 4 hulls of demoralized captives, guarded by nothing, ripe for sorting. What it was actually boarding was described precisely at the joint tribunal by the Compact's convoy master, who had watched the 40 minutes from her sealed bridge with professional awe. You must understand what those transports contained, she testified, not passengers, crews. Prisoner of war populations are navies in storage. Every trade aboard a warship was represented in those holds. Gunners, boatswains, engineers, corpsmen, masters-at-arms, 1,700 of them, board for years, organized to the tooth by 2 of the most relentless administrations in either fleet, and now issued, by their captor's own schedule, a purpose. The pirates were not outnumbered 3 to 1. They were outnumbered 3 to 1 by specialists. The 30 minutes was spent the way boarding repulse doctrine, which every soul aboard knew by heart from one navy or the other, dictated, own the geography. Corridor barricades built from ration pallets and deck plating, sited at the angles both doctrines agreed on and improved where they differed, lighting mapped and mapped for darkness. The transport's modest tool cribs, emptied and distributed by joint quartermasters, prying bars and cargo hooks and foam guns, with the Visar blocks taking the close-quarter posts by right of physiology, and the human blocks taking the hold's long lanes by right of marksmanship yet to be armed. Engineers of 2 navies, meeting over the transport's deck schematics, discovered the eternal brotherhood of engineers, and began, immediately, doing things to the pressure doors and gravity plating that neither fleet's regulations would have countenanced. The plan's first law, agreed in the hold and repeated down both chains in 2 languages, was the one the whole battle turned on: let them dock, let them in, take their weapons. The market's first wave would come aboard fat, confident and armed, into corridors that had been redesigned in half an hour by 1,700 professionals, and every weapon a pirate carried through an airlock was, doctrinally speaking, a delivery. Marshal Iona Cade, drifting in her disabled cutter with a spectator's view, logged the convoy's final pre-battle transmission, sent jointly and in the clear, addressed to the Sable Rose with copies to her log for the tribunal record. It said, "Exchange convoy. 17 notes your boarding preparations. Under compact law, passengers will exercise self-defense. You are advised that the passengers are 1,700 prisoners of war of 2 fleets under joint parole, and that we have all had a very frustrating war. Last chance to reconsider your business model. Signed, Webb, Colonel. Vresh, Flag, Captain. It has come to our attention that we outrank you." The market boarded at 1:05, 11 queues across 4 transports, 90 pirates in the first wave, and the first wave lasted, by Marshal Cade's log, 11 minutes. They came through the locks into amber corridors that felt wrong from the first step. Too quiet, too clean, the cattle nowhere in sight, and the wrongness resolved, lock section by lock section, into the oldest lesson of boarding actions. The side that owns the geography owns the hour. Barricades channeled every queue into lanes the defenders had chosen. Lights failed on cue, in the pirates' sections only. Gravity plating, retuned by the engineers' unholy alliance, went heavy in the pirate lanes and light in the defenders, so that men who had swaggered through 100 merchant hulls found themselves wading uphill into corridors where the defense arrived floating fast and from above. The foam guns spoke first, gluing the queues into struggling clusters, and then the close-quarter posts closed in, viscous strength and human leverage working the doctrine both navies shared: disarm, restrain, pass to the rear, next. The weapons flowed backward exactly as planned, to the joint quartermasters who issued them onward with receipts, because Webb's administration did nothing without receipts, and by 1320 the defenders of Exchange 17 were no longer unarmed, courtesy of their attackers. The second wave, thrown in angry, met organized fire and did not reach the barricades. Aboard the Sable Rose, the cartel's ledger-minded command performed its reassessment with commendable speed. Boarding had failed, the inventory had spoiled, the mathematics now favored cutting losses, which in the market's practice meant one of 2 exits: run or breach, puncture the transport's holds from outside, and take the survivors from a compliant, airless cargo. The threat went out on the open channel at 1341, businesslike as everything before it. Stand down your resistance, or we open your hulls to the void. In the mercy of Candle's hold, the joint command received it, and the log records that Vresh looked at Webb for a moment with what witnesses of both species describe as the first smile either had seen from her. "Colonel," she said, "they have just threatened to stop coming aboard. I believe that is our cue. Your pilots, my gunners, their landing craft. Shall we return some deliveries?" The counterstroke of Exchange 17 was flown in the market's own boarding craft, and crewed by the arithmetic of the holds, humans fly anything. Visir gunnery is a religion, and the first wave had delivered, along with its weapons, 11 functioning assault boats, docked and idling at the transport's locks. 3 were taken intact, flown by human pilot prisoners who had spent 3 years flying camp cots and now had thrust under their hands again, crewed by mixed sections, human breaches, Visir gun crews on the boat's door weapons, and the Joint Command's orders were shaped by the day's one strategic truth: the battle would be decided at the Sable Rose because piracy is a cartel, and cartels are a flagship. The 3 boats went out at 1400 under the pirates' own transponders, squawking recall codes lifted from their captured crews with, the tribunal noted delicately, vigorous persuasiveness, and the Sable Rose, midway through repositioning for its breaching run, recognized its own boats coming home and opened its docking spine, which was the last purely commercial decision the market's command ever made. The boarding of the Sable Rose ran 40 minutes, deck by deck, and it was the war both navies had trained their whole professional lives for and never fought, humans and Visar assaulting side by side, each fleet's doctrine patching the other's gaps. Corridor calls in 2 languages that the mixed sections had standardized in 90 minutes, in the field, into the pidgin still called, in both fleets' special operations schools, convoy standard. The pirates fought the way businessmen fight when the model collapses, hard at first, then bargaining, then not, and the cartel's ledgers, seized intact in the counting room adjacent to the bridge, would go on to fund, by 2 governments' joint decree, the compact's relief operations for a generation. The Sable Rose struck at 1443. Her captain, brought to his own wardroom, performed the day's final act of commerce. He asked, professionally curious, to whom he was surrendering, human or Visir. The answer he received is engraved on the Joint Campaign Medal, the only one ever issued by 2 enemy governments for the same action, and it was delivered by Colonel Marcus Webb and Flag, Captain Vresh in the same breath, having been agreed in advance, unanimously or not at all. Both, they said, simultaneously. Choose a flag to face, there are 2, and they are for once entirely in agreement. Exchange convoy. 17 came into Candle Station 10 hours late, and the neutral anchorage, which had been broadcasting increasingly frantic queries into the Reach's silence, watched the strangest procession in the history of the exchange system arrive out of the dark. 4 grey transports, red circles proud, escorted by 11 captured pirate hulls flying, in the absence of any protocol for the situation, flags improvised by the transport's fabric shops, the red circle of the compact, and beneath it, sewn side by side on one field, the standards of 2 fleets at war, an arrangement with no legal existence whatsoever, and, as the compact's convoy master noted in her report, no witnesses willing to object. The disabled Marshal Cutter came in on a towline, Marshal Cade having declined rescue by anyone except, in her words, my convoy, whose legal defense I intend to conduct personally and at length. The legal circus was real but brief, both fleets' judge advocates arriving loaded for catastrophe and finding, instead, the paperwork. Webb's administration had documented the entire engagement in exchange. Manifest format, the parole, signed by both commanders and witnessed by the compact, the receipts, weapon by captured weapon, the casualty rolls, mercifully short, 9 defenders lost across both blocks, honored jointly since, the prisoner handling logs for 300 captured pirates, kept to convention standards that the tribunal's own inspectors called, with some professional embarrassment, better than either fleet's field average. The parole's expiration clause resolved the rest. With the last border off the hulls, per the signed terms, the Third War ended, and 1,700 people went back to being honestly captured, and the exchange, the actual exchange, was conducted at Candle Station on schedule the following morning, with one amendment insisted upon by both prisoner columns over the objection of no one who valued their career. They crossed together, not in 2 passing columns, but in one mingled procession, the blocks deliberately interleaved, veterans of the hollows and the camps and the corridor barricades walking to their opposite ships side by side, and at the midpoint of the crossing hall, by an arrangement the 2 senior prisoners had made quietly the night before, Colonel Marcus Webb and Flag. Captain Vresh stopped, faced each other, and exchanged the salute of 2 commands relinquishing a joint commission, while both fleets' honor guards, present to receive their own, found themselves presenting arms to the enemy's returning prisoners as well, because nobody had issued instructions covering the situation, and the governments coped, in the way of governments presented with an accomplished fact that their publics had already fallen in love with. The Joint Campaign Medal, the Candle Star, was struck within the year, the first decoration in either species' history issued by 2 warring powers for the same action, its ribbon, the compact's red flanked by both fleets' colors, its reverse bearing the answer given in the Sable Rose's wardroom, B.O. teeth. Simultaneously, 1,713 were awarded, 1 for every defender of exchange. 17, and both fleets' uniform regulations, amended in the same season with suspiciously similar wording, authorize its wear above all other campaign ribbons on the reasoning, stated openly in the Human Fleet's amendment, that no other campaign has yet been fought entirely on behalf of everyone. The convoy parole entered both military codes as standing doctrine. Prisoners under neutral carriage, attacked by parties outside their war, may combine under joint command for the duration of the emergency, their combination extinguishing no allegiance and constituting no offense. The clause is titled, in both codes, Webb Vresh and its drafting committee included, at both governments' insistence, both of its namesakes who argued, their staffs recorded, about commas, unanimously or not at all, for 11 sessions, and produced a text that has never once required amendment. The Sable Market's remnants scattered and was hunted to nothing inside 2 years, pursued, in another first, by cooperating squadrons of 2 fleets still otherwise at war, under an exchange protection accord that the war's eventual armistice absorbed whole. Piracy against the Red Circle, which had been unthinkable by custom, became unthinkable by experience. The Market's fate having been added to the Reach's oral law, the Circle is not unguarded, it is guarded by whoever happens to be inside it, and you cannot know who that is, and at least once, it was everyone. Marshal Iona Cade conducted the convoy's legal defense as promised, at length victoriously, and retired years later as the Compact's chief of marshals, having reshaped its escort doctrine around the day's one operational finding, which she stated annually to each marshal class and which is stitched inside every Compact cutter's airlock. Your cutter is not the convoy's protection. Your cutter is the convoy's witness. The protection is the people. It was always going to be the people. Webb and Vresh were repatriated with their columns, debriefed at length by institutions unsure whether they were processing heroes or a diplomatic incident, and returned to their wars, which had, awkwardly for all concerned, not ended. Neither fought the other again. Both fleets' personnel offices, in quiet parallel, saw to it, the war's managers having concluded, without ever writing it down, that some assets are worth more intact than deployed. Webb finished the war training garrison commanders in the administration of captivity, his course notes opening with the sentence his students carved over the schoolhouse door, "A prisoner is a soldier whose weapon is order, remain armed." Vresh returned to cruiser command in another sector, and her fleet's records show that boarding actions against hulls under her protection ceased entirely, boarding parties of the era having developed, her official biography notes, a documented superstition. They corresponded through the Compact's neutral mails for the rest of the war and long past it, the letters published jointly by their estates, running to 400 pages of tactics, gardening, grievance administration, and one recurring argument about a comma in the Webb-Vresh clause that neither ever conceded. When the armistice finally came, both were present at the signing, by both delegations' arrangement, seated together, and the famous photograph of the ceremony, the one both species textbooks use, catches them in the third row, heads bent toward each other, visibly not listening to the speeches, annotating something. The Manifest of Exchange. 17 hangs in the Compact's headquarters at Candle Station, all 1,700 names, with the parole document beside it, and at the bottom of the parole, beneath the signatures and the witness seals, there is a line added in a third hand, small and unauthorized, discovered only when the documents were framed and attributed, on the strength of the handwriting, to some unknown member of the Joint Quartermaster's Section, human or vizier. No analysis has ever settled. Which is, everyone agrees, the point. It reads, received in full, one war, third party, unwanted. Disposed of jointly. No further deliveries accepted. All parties return to their proper enemies in good order, with thanks. Candle Station keeps the anniversary because neutrality needs holidays more than nations do, and the keeping has settled over the years into a form that the Compact's marshals conduct, and both fleets' veterans attend, wars permitting, which, since the armistice, they always have. It is called Crossing Day. At its center is a re-walking of the exchange hall in one mingled column. No ranks, no blocks, descendants and veterans and Compact crews together. pausing at the midpoint where two salutes were once exchanged, and the pause is not silent. By fierce tradition, it is filled with the corridor pigeon of the defense, convoy standard, whose greetings and cadence calls both fleets' special operations schools still teach, and whose first phrase, the one the mixed sections invented at the barricades to answer any hail whose language you could not yet see, is Crossing Day's official greeting and its entire philosophy. The phrase translates from its half-human, half-viscere bones as same corridor. The 3 captured assault boats are preserved at the station, one flown once a year by a mixed crew of cadets from both academies who compete ferociously for the seats. The Sable Rose's counting room is a classroom now, where the compact teaches convoy law to marshal candidates of every species in the Reach. Beneath the framed first page of the cartel's own ledger, its acquisition of the century entry annotated in red by some tribunal clerk with the outcome, and the annotation is the lesson, assets listed 1,700. Assets acquired, 0, cause, see assets. And when the day ends, the station's beacon plays the convoy home, the same signal. Exchange 17 transmitted at last arrival, composed jointly in the Mercy of Candle's hold and logged at Candle Station at EO 919 on the morning after the battle. The signal both fleets adopted, after the armistice, as the standard all clear of the joint rescue services, so that it is heard now, somewhere in the Reach, most weeks of any year, wherever people of any flag finish protecting each other. Convoy 17, all souls, both flags. The corridor is clear. Proceeding home. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. A new one leaves Earth every day.